D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. I think there's one thing we can all universally agree on. Dungeons and Dragons is doing great. Nobody has any problems with them whatsoever. They are universally popular. So I think it's time to slide over to the people's choice, Pathfinder. I do find it strange that there is such a dedicated role-playing game centered around a car. I'm sorry, I'm sure everybody's really tired of that joke. But Pathfinder strikes me as the more scrappy people's choice of tabletop role-playing games. I thought I'd get familiar with it the way I usually get familiar with things, by reading a bunch of spin-off material that's clearly meant for people who already are fans of the thing, and then complaining about it not being clear to me as a newcomer. And joyously, Pathfinder has put out a bunch of little short stories. That means I can sit down and read them all real quickly. And I read one. It's called Blood Crimes. That really fits, because this story has a lot of dark things going on in it. The story takes us to the city of Miclair, which I hope I am saying right, and to the execution of a paladin, screaming, "I didn't do anything wrong, he was a vampire." The city is in fact ruled by the dead, and mainly by vampires. The thing about vampires always being the ones in charge, I don't know if I buy it. Vampires can live forever, but they're super hyper dependent on humans. The thing about that is, wouldn't after one or two people, wouldn't humans immediately be alerted to the fact that there's a group of vampires out there killing people? I don't know. That feels like that would pop up pretty quickly. Our protagonist is Omera, the lady here. And in the grand tradition of a lot of fantasy stories, she's a thief, a pickpocket, living on the edges of society. And she's here to pickpocket people who have come to watch the execution. How brutal, how scarce, how bloodthirsty. I can't believe people actually watch the execution as fun. In fact, but that was a real thing. It's actually a real thing that people did in olden times. Executions were considered a wholesome family fun, and thus it was a really good spot for pickpockets. Listen, you have to understand, life was very boring before we invented TV and reading. You know what people also forget to do? Connect your microphone. People also forget to do that. So that's why the audio is going to sound different from here. Her ghoul friend runs up to her immediately, and we find out that the ghoul has eaten the body of a very important person. Or at least eaten the body of somebody that they definitely shouldn't have eaten. Because gangsters are after them. Getting killed by gangsters, that does not seem like it would be a good time. And the two of them agree, because they immediately start running away. And that's where they're saved by mysterious zombies. See, zombies are pretty commonplace in this setting, in this city. They're worker bees. Nobody thinks of them, nobody really notices them, and they do behave like zombies. It really reminds me of that movie Fido. I don't know if anybody saw that, but it's basically a post-zombie apocalypse, and zombies are being treated pretty much the same. This zombie's behaving a little bit different. It immediately yells out and tells the two to get out of the way and go to a secret spot. So it turns out he's not a real zombie. It's just a costume he's putting on. And it's a good way to sneak around the city undetected, because nobody really pays attention to zombies. And the zombie begins to behave very much unlike a zombie in that it's talking, and immediately recognizes that our protagonist, pickpocket girl, it is a girl, because according to the description here, she dresses pretty androgynous, which is funny because this is what the cover looks like. See, the zombie Ellis, who's the fellow's name, is a lot smarter and picks up on a lot more things, and immediately recognizes that the thugs that were chasing our pickpocket were in fact Chorus Fenn's men. Now, he's a big-time gangster, and that's really bad, because what are they after exactly? I'm going to tell you, because the ghoul didn't just eat the person, they got a little bit of a vial from the person. On the vial, there is a symbol for a chattel farm to the west. See, for a city of vampires, they need a constant supply of human victims, so they operate chattel farms, which is not the coolest thing in the world to do. And they're dressed like this, which is cool. See, it's important to sacrifice a few people so the rest of everybody gets to live. So she attacks a gangster by the name of Tyler at the chattel place, and immediately, like all good gangsters do, he immediately betrays his boss and tries to take power for himself, and joins up with them to burglarize the place and try and grab the antidote so they can make even more money. Is that the vials that they've got in their possession poison, and they're planning to poison certain people's blood. So when the certain houses drink them, they'll die, or at least get very sick, and then the mob boss can offer them the cure and get them in favor of the mob boss. Which I'm starting to think we're not really in the clean-cut good versus bad guy sort of thing. We're in the more dark fantasy. Everybody's a little bit of a bastard, because our protagonist tells us in a monologue that no, they're actually pretty cool with the way the system works right now, and they wouldn't want a bunch of people to die and disrupt that. So we are not in the realm of simple, easy to understand fantasy. I need to take off that hat and put in morally gray, everybody's a bastard. Let's explore the darkness of this world. I'm such a loser. See, if I was like in charge of a game and we were in the city, I would 100% be trying to bring down the whole chattel organization and probably the vampires. See, I unfortunately play usually uniformly good characters who desperately try and do the right thing no matter what. You may hate me. Don't worry, I hate myself too. And the truth of it is, this short story feels like it's mostly a setup to introduce people to the tone and environment of these sorts of cities and the morally gray things you're going to have to do to survive. The story ends with four of them, Ellis, the ghoul, our pickpocket protagonist, and Tyler, all planning to break into a highly guarded facility to steal the antidote so they get all the power for themselves. And it immediately goes wrong, and Tyler immediately betrays them. And it turns out that Ellis, our fake zombie, is in fact a Pathfinder, which is a thing I'm starting to get, which is very much like a spy or an adventurer, and it's not a car. And we learn that the mob boss actually really thinks that it's cool to have a Pathfinder. And although they plan to torture and kill our ghoul and our pickpocket, they leave them hanging in the room for a bit. There's some really funny, sharp descriptions of things. Listen, I get it. This is a dark comedy. There's a lot of dark humor in all of this. I really like this line. There are only a few things I hate worse than people who betray my trust. One of those, sadly, is being suspended from my wrists. That's funny. That made me chuckle. And a bunch of the lines here made me chuckle, honestly. And you get a lot of points for that in my book. They do the old cliche of her getting out by claiming she's about to get killed by the ghoul, but they actually may justify that later, because it turns out that so she kills the gangster Tyler. We've got another really funny line here. There were a couple of small gems in his purse as well, but they fit better in mine. That's pretty fun little thief talk right there. And then she breaks into the dining room, and we find that the mob boss and the Pathfinder have actually been having a pretty pleasant conversation in dinner. I like this line. The sausage in his hand didn't look much like torture unless you had a problem with grease. That's pretty funny. I think that's pretty funny. Turns out it's all cool. The mob boss offers our pickpocket hero the chance to work for them as an underboss. The pickpocket kind of rejects that, but it's all cool, really. No big deal. Mob boss is fine with that because there was traitors in his organization, and honestly, he's glad she got rid of them. He also thinks it's pretty darn cool to have a Pathfinder in the building and wants the Pathfinder to record his ascent. So are the Pathfinders not just traditional heroes? I guess they wouldn't be, because then you have players who don't want to do that, and you shouldn't force them to. Correct me in the comments, you genius Pathfinder players. I'm sure you know. Our pickpocket and our zombie get out unharmed, and the Pathfinder offers our pickpocket a chance to join the Pathfinders as a member, because they came off as pretty smart, and the pickpocket decides that it's probably a good idea. We need to get away from the mob bosses.